The elevator doors closed with a soft metallic click, but to Arman Haleem, it sounded like a final verdict sealing his fate. His heart pounded wildly in his chest as the numbers began to climb. 12. 19. 27. He knew, deep down, he had stepped into the wrong elevator. But he had no idea that in just 3 minutes, his name would light up every security screen in the building, and a CEO would be running after him. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom Story House. Stories like this remind us how powerful a single moment can be. Arman's life had never been easy, but lately, it felt like the world had decided to test every ounce of his strength. A single father of a 6-year-old daughter named Meher, he woke up every day before sunrise in their tiny rented room on the edge of the city. The room barely fit a mattress, a cracked cupboard, and a small stove, but to Meher, it was home. To Arman, it was both a shelter and a constant reminder of how far he still had to go. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him with grief too heavy to process and a child too young to understand. Since then, Arman had lived for one purpose only, to give Meher a better life than the one he was struggling through. That morning had been particularly difficult. Meher's school had sent a final notice, fees overdue. If he couldn't pay within a week, she would be removed from class. Arman had folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket, as though hiding it might somehow delay its consequences. But reality had a way of catching up. He had spent weeks applying for jobs, walking miles under the scorching sun, facing rejection after rejection. Some employers didn't even look at him twice. His worn-out shoes and faded shirt spoke louder than any resume he could present. But today felt different. Today, he had secured an interview at one of the largest corporate towers in the city. The kind of place where glass walls gleamed like mirrors and security guards watched every movement. He knew he didn't belong there, but he also knew he had no choice. As he stepped into the building, his eyes widened at the sheer scale of it. Polished floors reflected the ceiling lights, and employees moved with purpose, dressed in suits that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Arman hesitated at the entrance, clutching his folder tightly, reminding himself why he was here. For Meher. He approached the reception desk and gave his name. The woman behind the desk barely looked up as she directed him toward the elevators. Her voice was quick, mechanical, as though she repeated the same instructions hundreds of times a day. Arman nodded and walked toward the elevator area, his steps uncertain. There were multiple elevators, each labeled differently. He didn't fully understand the system, but when one opened, he stepped in without thinking twice. That was his mistake. The elevator he had entered wasn't meant for visitors or interview candidates. It was a private executive elevator, restricted access only. But Arman didn't know that. As the doors closed, he noticed something strange. The elevator was silent. Too silent. There were no buttons inside except a sleek panel with numbers already lighting up automatically. He frowned, confusion creeping in. This didn't feel right. Meanwhile, on the top floor, something unusual had already begun. In a spacious office overlooking the city skyline, CEO Xavier Rauf was reviewing security alerts when one particular notification caught his attention. An unauthorized individual had entered the executive elevator. The system had flagged the person immediately. Xavier leaned forward, his expression sharpening. This wasn't common. Security breaches in his building were rare, almost non-existent. Pull up the feed, he instructed. Within seconds, the screen displayed Arman's image, standing nervously in the elevator, clutching his folder, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. Xavier's eyes lingered on the man's face. There was something about him. Something familiar. Without another word, Xavier stood up abruptly and headed for the door. His sudden urgency surprised even his assistant. Back in the elevator, Arman's unease grew stronger. The numbers continued to climb, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. He wiped his sweaty palms against his pants, trying to calm himself. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to a floor unlike anything he had ever seen. It was quiet, almost intimidatingly so. The air felt different, heavier, more controlled. Arman stepped out hesitantly. Almost immediately, two security guards approached him. Their expressions were serious. "Sir, you're not authorized to be here," one of them said firmly. Arman froze. Panic surged through him. I'm here for an interview," he stammered, holding up his folder as though it could prove his innocence. But before the situation could escalate further, a voice cut through the tension. "Wait." Everyone turned. Xavier Ralph was walking toward them, his pace quick, his eyes locked on Arman. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Arman felt his breath catch in his throat as the powerful man approached. He had never seen someone carry such presence, calm yet commanding. Xavier stopped just a few feet away, studying him closely. And then, something unexpected happened. Recognition. A flicker of memory crossed Xavier's face. Years ago, when Xavier had been a struggling university student, there had been a night he rarely spoke about. He had been stranded in the rain, broke, hungry, and desperate. No one had stopped to help him. Except one man. A stranger who had offered him food, shelter, and enough money to get through the week. That man had been Arman. Back then, Arman had nothing, but he had still given what little he had. Xavier had never forgotten that night. And now, standing before him, was the same man, only life had clearly not been kind to him since. The silence stretched as realization settled in. "Let him go," Xavier said quietly, his voice carrying authority. The security guard stepped back immediately. Arman stood there, confused, overwhelmed, unsure of what was happening. Xavier took a step closer. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. Arman shook his head slowly. And honestly, how could he? That night had been just one of many small acts of kindness in his life. He had never expected anything in return. Xavier gave a faint smile. "I remember you," he said. What followed wasn't just a conversation, it was a turning point. Within hours, Arman's life began to change in ways he could never have imagined. Not because of luck. Not because of connections. But because of a single act of kindness he had shown years ago, without expecting anything back. Xavier didn't just offer him a job, he offered him dignity. A position tailored to his abilities, fair pay, and most importantly, stability. For the first time in years, Arman felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. That evening, when he returned home, Meher ran into his arms like she always did. But this time, something was different. He held her a little tighter, his eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. He didn't tell her everything, not yet. But he knew one thing for sure. Their life was about to change. And as he looked around their small room, it no longer felt like a place of struggle. It felt like the beginning of something new. Before we reach the end, take a moment to comment below. Have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Because sometimes, the smallest kindness can echo louder than we ever imagine. Days turned into weeks, and Arman slowly adapted to his new life. He worked hard, determined to prove he deserved the opportunity he had been given. But more than that, he carried forward the same kindness that had once defined him. He treated everyone with respect, no matter their position. And people noticed. Because kindness, when it's genuine, has a way of standing out. One evening, as Arman stood by the office window, watching the city lights flicker on, Xavier approached him. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. Some moments don't require words. They simply exist, quiet, powerful, unforgettable. If this story touched your heart even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House. Your support helps keep stories like this alive, stories that remind us that even in a world that often feels harsh, kindness still finds its way back. Because sometimes, it only takes 3 minutes to change a life.